Drink it, babe. It will help us have a baby.
Yes, my dear. Drink it fast before it gets cold.
She knew what was in her tea. She had known for 4 months. Every evening her husband would hand her the cup with that warm, encouraging smile and say, "Drink it, babe. It will help us have a baby." And every evening his mother would lean in from the other side and say, "Yes, my dear. Drink it fast before it gets cold." And every evening Elena Marsh would hold that cup in both hands. Look at it. Look at the two of them watching her with such careful, rehearsed warmth. And she would drink it. She would smile. She would say thank you. And then she would excuse herself to the bathroom and expel every single drop and return to the table and continue the evening as if nothing had happened.
Excuse me.
Because Elena Marsh was a nurse. And 3 weeks after she first noticed something was wrong, she had taken that tea to the hospital lab where she worked and had read the results alone in the bathroom with the door locked. And she had made a decision that night. She was going to let them keep doing it. She was going to document everything. And she was going to wait until she had exactly what she needed. What they did not know was that she was already pregnant. What they did not know was that Elena Marsh had never been the woman they thought she was. She knew what was in her tea. She had known for 4 months. Every evening her husband would hand her the cup with that warm, encouraging smile and say, "Drink it, babe. It will help us have a baby." And every evening his mother would lean in from the other side and say, "Yes, my dear. Drink it fast before it gets cold." And every evening Elena Marsh would hold that cup in both hands. Look at it. Look at the two of them watching her with such careful, rehearsed warmth. And she would drink it. She would smile. She would say thank you. And then she would excuse herself to the bathroom and expel every single drop and return to the table and continue the evening as if nothing had happened, because Elena Marsh was a nurse. And 3 weeks after she first noticed something was wrong, she had taken that tea to the hospital lab where she worked and had read the results alone in the bathroom with the door locked. And she had made a decision that night. She was going to let them keep doing it. She was going to document everything. And she was going to wait until she had exactly what she needed. What they did not know was that she was already pregnant. What they did not know was that Elena Marsh had never been the woman they thought she was. Elena had grown up in a household that understood precision. Her mother was a pharmacist and her father was an engineer, and the combination of those two professional orientations had produced in Elena a specific quality of mind that she had carried into nursing, and that had made her exceptional at it. The ability to observe carefully, measure accurately, and act on evidence rather than assumption. She had graduated at the top of her class. She had been recruited by 3 hospitals before accepting the position she currently held, which was in a specialty ward that required the particular combination of technical knowledge and human perception that most nurses developed over decades and that Elena had possessed since approximately her 2nd year of training. She was, in the estimation of every consultant she had worked with, the kind of nurse you wanted in the room when something was going wrong, because she was the kind of person who noticed things going wrong before they had finished going wrong. This was professionally invaluable. It was also, as it turned out, personally invaluable in ways that nobody in that bedroom had anticipated when they had begun adding things to her tea. She had met Marcus Marsh 3 years ago at a hospital fundraising event that she had attended because attendance was professionally expected and that she had intended to leave after 45 minutes. She had stayed for 3 hours because Marcus had been standing near the door when she had tried to leave and had said something that made her laugh. Not a performed laugh, a real one, the kind that arrives before you can manage it. And the conversation that followed had the specific quality of conversations that happen when 2 people discover simultaneously that the other one is worth talking to. Marcus was warm and direct and had a quality of attentiveness that she had found immediately appealing. He listened to what she said rather than waiting for his turn to speak, which was rarer than it should have been, and which she had learned to value in direct proportion to how infrequently she encountered it. They had dated for 8 months and had married in a ceremony that was small and honest and exactly what both of them had wanted. Elena had been happy. She had been genuinely, specifically happy in the way that is different from contentment or comfort, the kind of happy that is accompanied by the specific gratitude of a person who knows what they have found. Patricia Marsh had been at the wedding. Of course, she had been at the wedding. Patricia was at everything that involved Marcus, because Patricia had been at everything that involved Marcus for his entire life, and had not adjusted this position following his marriage, because adjusting it would have required acknowledging that Elena was now the primary person in Marcus's life, and Patricia had never been willing to acknowledge anything that reduced her own centrality to a situation she considered hers. She was 61 years old and had raised Marcus alone following his father's departure when Marcus was 7, and had built her identity so completely around her son's life and well-being that the concept of her son's life existing independently of her input was not something she had developed the cognitive framework to accommodate. She was not, in the obvious ways, a difficult woman. She was warm at family gatherings and remembered birthdays, and brought food when she visited, and said the right things in the right situations with the practiced ease of someone who had learned that performing warmth was more effective than demanding it. Elena had liked her in the beginning. She had liked her for the first 6 months of the marriage before she had begun noticing the specific ways in which Patricia's warmth was contingent. Deployed when things were going the way Patricia wanted to go, and withdrawn subtly when they were not. The fertility issue had surfaced in the first year. It had surfaced as a pressure rather than a conversation. The specific ambient pressure of mother-in-law who mentioned grandchildren with a frequency that went beyond enthusiasm into something that had weight to it, that sat in the room after she left and made itself felt. Marcus wanted children. Elena wanted children. They had been trying since the wedding with the specific patient optimism of two people who have decided they are ready and are willing to give the process the time it requires. The time it required had extended past the point where optimism remained the only appropriate response and into the territory where clinical consultation became sensible. They had been tested. The results had been ambiguous in the specific way that fertility results are sometimes ambiguous. Nothing definitively wrong on either side. Nothing definitively right. Just a frustrating gray zone that fertility medicine occupies when the body is doing things that defy simple categorization. Elena had understood the results with the clinical precision of someone who read medical reports regularly and had felt, beneath the clinical understanding, the specific human weight of what ambiguous meant when applied to something you wanted clearly. Patricia had interpreted the results differently. Patricia had looked at the ambiguity and had constructed from it the interpretation that served her, that the problem was Elena's, that the ambiguity was a diplomatic way of saying what the results could not quite say directly, and that the solution was therefore Elena's responsibility and Elena's failure, and that something needed to be done. What Patricia did with this interpretation was something that she had apparently been planning for some time, something that required a contact she had maintained for reasons Elena had not yet fully understood, and a compound that the contact had provided, and the specific domestic mechanism of the evening tea that Patricia prepared on the 3 evenings per week she came to dinner, and that Marcus drank without question because Marcus trusted his mother in the unexamined way of someone who had. Never had a reason not to. Elena had noticed a pattern in week 3, not the compound. She had not yet identified what it was, only that something was wrong in a way that correlated with specific evenings and specific teas, and that her body was communicating with the specific urgency that bodies use when they have been introduced to something they do not recognize. She had the clinical training to know that correlation required investigation before it became conclusion, and so she had investigated. She had taken samples of the tea on 2 separate evenings. Carefully, without drawing attention to collection, in the way that a woman who works in a clinical environment and understands sample collection procedure collects samples when she does not want anyone to know she is collecting them. She had taken them to the hospital lab and had asked Sandra, the lab technician she had worked with for 4 years, to run a panel. She had framed the request in language that did not require explanation, and Sandra had processed it without asking questions because Sandra had worked with Elena long enough to know that Elena did not make requests without good reason. The results had come back on a Tuesday. Elena had been in the middle of a shift when Sandra had sent a message saying the results were ready, and she had finished the next 2 hours of her shift with the specific focused composure of a woman who has learned to compartmentalize, because compartmentalization in her profession was not optional, and had then gone to the lab at the end of the shift and collected the printed results and had taken them to the hospital bathroom and had locked the door and had read them in the specific way that you read something when you already know it is going to confirm your worst theory and are simply waiting for the confirmation to arrive in written form. The compound was a hormonal suppressant, not a sedative, not anything that announced itself with obvious symptoms. Something subtle, something designed to interfere with the specific hormonal conditions required for conception in a way that looked, from the outside, like a natural fertility issue. It was sophisticated in the specific way that things are sophisticated when the person who has selected them has done research. Elena had stood in that bathroom and looked at the results and had thought about Patricia preparing the tea with the specific focused warmth she brought to everything she did in that house, and had felt something move through her that was not quite rage and not quite grief but contained elements of both, and that resolved itself. within the space of approximately 4 minutes, into the specific cold clarity of a person who has understood something completely and has decided what they are going to do about it. She had also, in those 4 minutes, remembered something. She had remembered the appointment she had attended 6 weeks ago, the routine obstetric check that she had scheduled because she was a nurse, and nurses kept their own health appointments with a diligence that they recommended to their patients. The appointment at which her obstetrician had said, with the warm directness of a woman who had delivered this news many times and had learned that directness was kinder than delay, that Elena was pregnant, 6 weeks along, early enough that the only people who knew were Elena and her obstetrician, and now, from this moment forward, the bathroom mirror. She had been 6 weeks pregnant. For 2 of the 3 weeks, she had been drinking the doctored tea. The pregnancy had survived it. She had understood, in the bathroom with the results in her hands, that this was not luck. It was biology, the specific robust biology of a pregnancy that had established itself firmly enough before the exposure began to withstand 2 weeks of a compound that had not been present when the implantation occurred. The baby was fine. She was going to make sure it stayed that way. She had stopped drinking the tea that same evening, not by refusing it. Refusing it would have required explanation, and explanation was not part of the plan she was building. She had accepted the cup with both hands, looked at Marcus's warm smile and Patricia's watchful warmth, and she had drunk it. And then she had excused herself to the bathroom and had expelled every drop with the specific efficient calm of a woman executing a decision she has already fully made. She had returned to the table. She had said the tea was lovely. Patricia had smiled. Marcus had squeezed her hand. Elena had looked at both of them across the table and had understood that the 4 months ahead of her were going to require a quality of sustained performance that would be the most demanding thing she had ever done. She had performed it every evening for 4 months and had not faltered once. Sandra had run a second set of tests without being asked. She had done it in week 6 of Elena's documentation process. Not because Elena had requested it, but because Sandra had processed the first results and had found something that her 16 years in the lab had told her required a second look. She had run a broader panel than Elena had requested and had found a second compound, not the hormonal suppressant, something else, something more recent, something that had a different target and a different mechanism, and that Sandra had identified with the specific methodical expertise of a woman who had spent 16 years developing exactly the skill set required to identify it. She had put the results in an envelope and had given it to Elena on a Thursday morning, without saying anything except that she hoped it was helpful. Elena had opened in the hospital bathroom with the door locked and had read what Sandra had found and had been very still for a very long time. The second compound was the thing that changed the legal weight of everything Patricia had done. It was not designed to prevent conception. It was designed to interfere with implantation, to make the uterine environment hostile to a pregnancy that had already begun. It had been added to the tea 3 months ago, approximately at the point when the hormonal suppressant had not produced the results Patricia had anticipated, and she had escalated. Elena had been expelling the tea for 4 months. The compound had never reached her system. The pregnancy had never been exposed to it. But the fact of its presence, the fact that Patricia had obtained it and added it and had done so with the specific intent of ending a pregnancy that, had Elena actually been drinking the tea, would have been her pregnancy, had changed the nature of what Patricia had done from serious to something considerably more serious in the eyes of the law. Elena had called a lawyer the same afternoon. She had made the appointment for the following Monday and had attended it with a folder that contained 4 months of documentation. The lab results, the sample collection records, the timeline she had maintained of every evening, every cup, every smile, every thank you she had said while expelling the content of the cup in the bathroom 30 seconds later. The lawyer had looked at the folder and had been very still for a moment, and then had said that this was the most comprehensive cell-generated evidence file she had seen in 11 years of practice. Elena had said she was a nurse. The lawyer had said that explained it. Elena had said it explained a great deal of things. She had found Christine through the specific patient research of a woman who has decided to understand the full picture before acting on any part of it. Christine had been Marcus's fiancée 4 years ago, a fact that Elena had known in the way that you know things about a partner's history that are offered voluntarily, and that you file without examining too closely because they belong to a chapter that is concluded. She had known Christine's name and the approximate shape of the story. Engaged for 8 months, ended by Christine irreconcilable differences, moved away afterward. She had not known anything else until 4 months of living inside Patricia's operation had made the shape of irreconcilable differences look considerably less like a natural conclusion, and considerably more like a woman who had left a situation she could not fully explain. Elena had found Christine through a combination of social media and a mutual contact from Marcus's past, and had sent a message that was careful and specific, and that Christine had not responded to for 11 days. The 11 days had not surprised Elena. She had waited with the patience of a woman who had been waiting 4 months already, and for whom 11 more days was a manageable addition to the total. Christine had called on a Wednesday evening. The conversation had lasted 3 hours and had covered territory that confirmed every theory Elena had been building, and had also produced something she had not expected. Christine had kept documentation. She had suspected something during the engagement, had not been able to confirm it, had left before she could, and had arrived in a different city and a different life, and had put the experience in the part of her mind reserved for things she could not fully explain, and had not gone back to it. But she had kept the records, the notes she had made of specific evenings, specific symptoms, the specific teas that Patricia had prepared, the timeline that was not identical to Elena's, but was similar enough in its structure to be recognizable as the same operation run by the same person for the same purpose. Christine had kept them because she had understood, without knowing exactly what she was understanding, that they might matter someday. They mattered now. She had sent them to Elena the following morning, and Elena had added them to the folder, and the folder had become something that her lawyer had described, at their second meeting, as close to airtight as she had seen in a very long time. The Sunday dinner had been Elena's decision. She had considered the options available to her. She could have let the legal process run its course without a direct confrontation, which would have been cleaner, and would have allowed her to avoid the specific emotional weight of sitting across a table from Marcus and Patricia and watching their faces as the full picture arrived. She had considered this option seriously and had rejected it for a specific reason. Marcus did not know. She had examined this from every angle available to her over 4 months of careful watching and careful thinking, and had arrived at a conclusion she believed was accurate, that Marcus had been given supplements by his mother that he had been told were for his health, and that he had taken without question because he trusted his mother in the unexamined way that he trusted her, and that he had no knowledge of what his mother had been adding to Elena's tea or why. He was a victim of his mother's operation in a different way than Elena was. Not in a way that absolved him of the responsibility of having created conditions that made the operation possible, but in a way that distinguished his culpability from Patricia's. Elena had needed him to receive the information in a context where she could see his face receive it, not to punish him, to know for certain, with her own clinical eyes, whether the conclusion she had reached about his not knowing was correct. She had needed to see the truth of it on his face in real time, because she had a decision to make about her marriage and her child's father, and she was not willing to make that decision based on inference when the direct evidence was available. She had chosen the last Sunday dinner she would attend in that house. She had sat at the table and eaten the meal that Patricia had prepared, and had declined the tea when it was offered, politely, with a smile, saying she was feeling slightly off and did not want to risk anything, and had watched Patricia's expression when she declined, and had noted the specific quality of what the expression contained, which was not concern but calculation, the specific look of a woman recalibrating. Then Elena had reached into her bag. She had placed the lab results on the table first. Then Christine's documentation. Then the letter from her lawyer outlining the charges that had been filed that morning with the relevant authorities. She had placed them one at a time, unhurried, in the silence of a room that had gone very quiet. Patricia had looked at the documents. She had been very still in the way that people are still when they have received something they cannot immediately construct a response to, and are using the stillness to find one. Marcus had looked at the documents, and then at Elena, and then at his mother, and the looking had told Elena everything she had needed to know. The specific quality of a man receiving information about someone he loves that is dismantling his understanding of them in real time. The specific expression of someone who did not know and is now knowing, and the knowing is arriving in stages, each one more devastating than the previous. He had not known. She had seen it with her own clinical eyes, and she had been certain of it in a way she had not been certain of anything since the bathroom 4 months ago. Elena had stood up. She had said she would be staying at a friend's house while things were resolved. She had said her lawyer would be in touch with Marcus's regarding the marriage and with the relevant authorities regarding Patricia. She had said she hoped Marcus would take care of himself, and had meant it in the specific way that you mean something about a person you have loved and are not finished deciding about. She had said one more thing at the door. She had turned back and looked at the table, Marcus with his hands flat on it, Patricia very still, and she had said she was 14 weeks pregnant, and that the baby was healthy, and that she had been protected for 4 months without either of them knowing it needed protecting. Then she had walked out. Marcus had called the next morning at 7:38. She had been awake. She had been awake since 5, which was her body's response to significant events, the specific early waking of a person whose mind has not finished processing what the previous day produced. She had answered. The conversation had lasted 2 hours. It had been honest in the specific way that conversations are honest when everything that was concealing the need for honesty has been simultaneously removed. He had said things she needed to hear. He had asked things she needed to answer. He had listened to the answers with the full attention of a man who has understood that listening is the most important thing he can do and possibly the only thing that has any chance of matching. She had listened to him too. By the end of the 2 hours, nothing had been decided, and both of them had understood that nothing being decided was the correct outcome for a conversation that was the first honest one they had ever had, and that more honest conversations would need to follow before decisions were appropriate. She had said she would be in touch. He had said he would be waiting. She had believed him. She was not certain what she was going to do with that belief. She was certain that she had time to find out. Patricia was charged on a Thursday. The charges covered the hormonal suppressant and the second compound, and the legal framing of what both of them had been intended to do, which was considerable. The outcome of the charges was months away, and Elena did not follow it with any particular attention, because following it would have required giving Patricia more of her mental space than Patricia deserved, and Elena had a great deal of other things requiring her mental space. The apartment she had moved to was bright and south-facing, and had a room with good light. That was going to be a nursery. She had painted herself on a Saturday in the specific meditative way that physical tasks serve when a person needs to do something with their hands, while their mind continues working on something else. The color she had chosen was a warm yellow that looked exactly right in the afternoon light the way she had known it would, because she had held the paint swatch against the wall at 3 different times a day before committing to it, which was how Elena did things, methodically, with full information, without rushing conclusion. Sandra had sent flowers when she heard Elena was pregnant. The card said she was glad she had run the second panel. Elena had called her and said she was glad too. Sandra had said she always ran the second panel when something felt wrong, and that 16 years in the lab had taught her that the second panel was almost always the one that mattered. Elena had said that was the most useful thing anyone had said to her in recent memory, and had written it down because it was the kind of thing worth writing down. Sandra had laughed and said she would add it to her professional philosophy. Elena had said she thought it already was. Sandra had agreed. The baby was due in April. Elena had told her mother in December, on a Sunday afternoon over tea, real tea chosen by Elena, prepared by Elena, entirely hers, and her mother had held her hands across the kitchen table and said she was going to be extraordinary at this. Elena had said she hoped so. Her mother had said hope was not the right word. She had watched Elena be extraordinary at everything she had ever decided to be extraordinary at, and a baby was not going to be the exception. Elena had looked at her mother across the table and had thought about the 4 months and the bathroom and the lab results and the folder and the Sunday dinner and the conversation at 7:38 in the morning, and had understood that her mother was right not because Elena was extraordinary in any abstract sense, but because she had the specific quality of a person who pays attention and acts on what she observes and does not stop until the thing that needs to be done has been done. She had always had that quality. It had served her in her profession every single day. It had saved her pregnancy. It had saved her from a situation that had been designed to make her feel like she was failing at something that was being ensured she would fail at. It had given her, at the end of 4 months that were the hardest of her life, the specific clean satisfaction of a woman who has faced something designed to break her and has not been broken. She finished the tea. She set the cup down on the kitchen table in her south-facing apartment on a Thursday morning in January. Outside the window, the city was doing what it always did, moving, continuous, entirely itself. The nursery was painted yellow. The folder was with the lawyer. The charges were filed. The conversation at 7:38 had happened, and more conversations were coming. And she was not certain yet where they would lead, and she was comfortable with not being certain because certainty, in her experience, was not the goal. Evidence was the goal. Observation was the goal. Acting on what you found rather than what you wish you had found was the goal. She had done all 3. The rest was going to arrive in its own time, and she was going to meet it with the same quality she had brought to everything else. Present, precise, and entirely prepared.
Subscribe.